Hey there, knee geeks, and welcome back for another deep dive into the world of knees. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of our knee-centric content. Today, we're taking a look at a patient who lived over 3,000 years ago.
That's right. We're going to be examining the knee of King Tutankhamun.
Now, I don't know about you, but as a radiologist, I always love getting my hands on some new images. And today's case is especially cool because we're talking about a pharaoh.
And as an orthopedic surgeon, I have to say, the chance to analyze an ancient knee injury is just incredible.
So we've got CT scans, we've got research articles, medical reports, historical accounts, all about King Tut.
Yeah, our goal today is to break down all this info and see what we can learn about Tutankhamun's knee.
So before we get into the specifics of Tut's knee, let's set the stage a bit. We've got a ton of sources here, and they all focus on this pharaoh's health.
Exactly. And for those of you who might not know, paleopathology is basically the study of diseases in ancient times. By examining mummies and skeletons, we can learn a lot about the health challenges people faced way back when.
And the ancient Egyptians were really good at preserving bodies through mummification, which gives us an amazing look into their medical history.
Exactly. And these days, with modern technology like CT scans and DNA analysis, we can examine these ancient remains in ways that people in the past just couldn't have even dreamed of.
It's like having a time machine for medicine. So let's jump into that time machine and take a look at King Tut's health.
All right, knee geeks, get ready for this. King Tut wasn't exactly the picture of perfect health. He actually had a bunch of different ailments. He had mild kyphoscoliosis, which is a curvature of the spine.
Oh, wow.
He also had pes planus, or flat feet.
You don't see that every day.
And then there's hypophalangism. That basically means he was missing bones in his right foot.
Wow, that's a rough start. Can you imagine dealing with all that as a teenager?
And the hits keep coming. He also had bone necrosis in his left foot.
For our viewers at home, bone necrosis is when the bone tissue starts to die.
Right. And if that wasn't enough, he also had malaria.
Malaria. Poor guy. It really makes you grateful for modern medicine, huh?
Absolutely. But let's get to the star of the show, the reason why we're all here today, Tut's knee.
Yeah, the knee. And as a radiologist, I'm always interested in complex fractures. And Tut's knee injury is definitely complex.
Oh, yeah, it is. He had a fracture of his right knee, and it's classified as a 33C3 according to the AO classification.
I bet our knee geeks are dying to know what that means. Can you break that down for us?
Sure. The AO classification is just a system that we orthopedic surgeons use to describe fractures. It tells us about the location of the fracture and how complex it is. A 33C3 means that this was a really severe fracture involving both the femur, which is the thigh bone, and the tibia, the shin bone. And it also tells us that there were multiple bone fragments.
So this wasn't like a simple slip and fall kind of injury. It sounds like it would have taken a lot of force to cause this kind of fracture.
Yeah, exactly. This isn't the kind of fracture you get from tripping over your cat or stubbing your toe. This had to be a high-energy impact, like a serious fall from a height or a collision with something or someone.
So we've established that this was a serious injury. But the big question is, what actually caused it?
Right. And there are a few theories out there. Some researchers think it might have been a chariot accident.
Oh yeah, chariots?
Chariot racing was super popular in ancient Egypt, and it was known to be really dangerous.
Those chariots definitely didn't have seatbelts and airbags.
Nope. So it's easy to picture Tut taking a bad spill during a race and really hurting his knee. It's definitely a possibility. But we're talking about a pretty complex fracture here, not just a simple break.
Right. So what other theories are there?
Well, another theory is that maybe Tutankhamun had seizures.
Oh.
And what if he had a seizure and collapsed and fractured his knee that way?
That's a sad thought.
Yeah.
But it's definitely possible. And, I mean, we know he wasn't in the best shape. So it wouldn't be all that surprising if he had some other conditions going on that could have caused a seizure.
Exactly. And there are some even more out there theories, like maybe he got kicked by an animal.
Oh, yeah, like a horse kick.
Yeah.
I've seen those cause some really bad knee injuries.
Yeah, those animals can really do some damage. But here's where it gets interesting. One theory that's been proposed is that Tutankhamun was attacked by a hippopotamus.
Wait, a hippo? Are you serious?
Yeah. I know it sounds crazy, but hippos are incredibly strong animals with huge teeth. I mean, they can weigh up to 4,000 pounds. And they're known to be pretty aggressive, especially when they feel threatened.
Okay, I can see how a hippo attack could lead to a pretty serious knee injury. But wouldn't there be other injuries too?
Well, you'd think so, right? And that's one of the main issues with this whole hippo attack idea. Besides the knee fracture, there's no other evidence of injuries that you would expect from a hippo attack.
So the hippo theory, while very dramatic, is probably not the most likely explanation.
Probably not, but it just goes to show how much mystery surrounds this whole thing. But before we get too focused on the knee fracture, let's talk about something else that's really interesting. The possibility of a genetic syndrome affecting Tutankhamun's family.
Oh yeah, the so-called 18th dynasty syndrome. This is where things get really interesting. What is that all about?
So basically, researchers noticed that a few pharaohs from the 18th dynasty had some unusual physical features in common. We're talking about Tutankhamun, his father Akhenaten, and possibly even Smenkhar, who might have been Tutan's uncle or brother.
Okay, so what kind of unusual features are we talking about?
Well, Akhenaten especially was often depicted with a really long and narrow face, a prominent chin, a long neck, and most notably gynecomastia.
Gynecomastia. For those who don't know, that means the development of breast tissue in men. Not exactly a common feature for pharaohs.
Yeah, not exactly. And there are some depictions of Tutankhamun that seem to hint at gynecomastia as well. But it's hard to say for sure because the soft tissues in his chest area were removed during mummification.
So we have these artistic representations that might show gynecomastia, but no actual physical evidence. So what are some of the conditions that could explain these unusual features?
Well, there are a few possibilities. Some researchers think it could be familial gynecomastia, which is a type of gynecomastia that runs in families. Others have suggested aromatase excess syndrome. That's a genetic disorder that can cause gynecomastia and short stature in adults. And then there's also Antley-Bixler syndrome. It's a rare genetic disorder that can cause a bunch of different skeletal and developmental problems, and sometimes gynecomastia.
So is this 18th dynasty syndrome a real thing? Or is it just a bunch of speculation based on ancient art?
That's the million-dollar question, and to be honest, we don't really know for sure yet. The theory is interesting, and there's definitely some evidence to support it, but we need more research to figure out if these pharaohs really did share a genetic condition or if there's another explanation for their unusual appearances.
It's like a real-life medical mystery.
Exactly. And speaking of medical mysteries, we can't forget about the bone necrosis in Tutankhamun's foot. That's another thing that has researchers scratching their heads.
Yeah. What are some of the theories about that?
Well, one possibility is morbus choler type 2. It's a condition that affects the development of certain bones in the foot, and it can sometimes lead to bone necrosis. Another possibility is sickle cell anemia. That's a blood disorder that can cause a lot of different complications, including bone problems. Then there's morbus Gaucher, which is a rare genetic disorder that can affect different organs, including bones. And of course, we can't rule out the possibility that the bone necrosis was caused by an infection or an injury.
So it seems like Tutankhamun's foot was just as medically complex as his knee.
Absolutely. To understand his case, we really need to look at all these things together. The knee fracture, the possible genetic syndrome, the bone necrosis, and his overall health.
It's like putting together a giant puzzle.
Mm.
But speaking of puzzles, we've been kind of dancing around the biggest mystery of all, the cause of Tutankhamun's death.
Yeah, how did King Tut die at such a young age? It's a question that has fascinated people for centuries.
So what do we know?
Well, the most common theory right now is that it was a combination of things, most likely the knee fracture and or malaria.
Okay, so how could a knee fracture have killed him?
Well, remember, this is ancient Egypt. They didn't have antibiotics or modern surgical techniques. A complex fracture like the one Tutankhamun had would have been incredibly painful and debilitating, and it would have made him very vulnerable to infection. And when you're immobile after a major fracture, you can develop other complications like blood clots, which can be fatal.
So the knee fracture could have set off a chain reaction that ultimately led to his death.
Huh.
What about malaria? How could that have contributed?
Well, malaria is a serious parasitic disease that can cause all sorts of problems. Fever, chills, fatigue, even organ failure. If Tutankhamun was already weakened from his knee fracture, a case of malaria could have easily been too much for his body to handle.
It's a sad story, but it makes sense given what we know about his health and the state of medicine back then.
Exactly. And remember those walking sticks that were found in his tomb? Those suggest that he was already having trouble getting around before he died, which supports the theory that the knee fracture played a big role in his decline.
It's amazing that we can learn so much about a person's life and health from remains that are thousands of years old. Paleopathology is incredible.
It really is. But even with all our modern technology and knowledge, there's still so much we don't know about Tutankhamun.
That's what makes history so fascinating. There's always something new to discover.
Well, Knee Geeks, we've covered a lot today. We talked about Tutankhamun's complex knee fracture, the possibility of a genetic syndrome, and the mystery surrounding his death.
And don't forget about that hippo.
Oh yeah, the hippo attack theory. We can't leave that out.
It's definitely a memorable one.
It is. But before we wrap up, there's one more fascinating detail we want to share with you. And it has to do with Tut's family tree.
That's right. Tune in next time as we delve into the world of royal genetics and find out how Tutankhamun's family history might have played a role in his health problems. Welcome back, Knee Geeks, to part 3 of our deep dive into King Tut's knee.
We've been looking at all sorts of fascinating aspects of this case.
From that complex fracture to the idea that maybe there was a genetic condition running in his family.
And we've considered a whole bunch of potential causes for the knee injury, like that crazy theory about a chariot accident.
But last time we left off with a real cliffhanger.
Yeah.
A truly bizarre theory about what might have caused Tut's injury.
You could say that again. It's something you'd expect to see on a nature documentary, not in an ancient Egyptian tomb.
We're talking about the hippopotamus attack theory.
Yep.
I'm not going to lie, when I first heard about this theory, I thought it was a joke.
Yeah.
A hippo attack.
Really?
But then I started thinking about it. And as a radiologist, I know that sometimes the most unexpected things turn out to be true.
That's true. And we are talking about ancient Egypt, a place where hippos roamed the Nile, and people lived pretty close to these massive animals.
So what's the evidence for this theory? Is there any?
Well, it's mostly circumstantial. It's based on the type of injuries that Tut had. Like we talked about, his knee fracture was caused by a really powerful impact. Whatever hit him had to be strong. And hippos are definitely strong enough to do that kind of damage.
True. But wouldn't a hippo attack have caused other injuries too? I mean, those things are huge. If a hippo charged at me, I wouldn't expect to walk away with just a broken knee.
You'd think so, right? And that's one of the problems with this theory. Besides the knee fracture, there's no evidence of any other injuries that you typically see after a hippo attack.
So it seems like the hippo attack theory, while super interesting, is probably not the most likely explanation.
Yeah, I'd say it's definitely the most dramatic theory, but maybe not the most plausible. There are other explanations that make more sense, like the chariot accident, the seizure, or even a kick from another animal. But the fact that people are even considering the hippopotamus theory shows just how mysterious Tutankhamun's life and death really are, and that's what makes this whole case so fascinating.
Absolutely. It reminds us that history is full of unsolved mysteries, and that even the most famous figures from the past can still surprise us. We may never know for sure what caused Tutankhamun's knee injury, but it's been a wild ride exploring all the different possibilities.
It really has. And it's been amazing to use our knowledge of knees, both ancient and modern, to try and make sense of this case.
Well, knee geeks, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the mysteries of King Tutankhamun's knee.
We covered a lot of ground.
We talked about his complex fracture, the possibility of a genetic syndrome, the wild hippopotamus attack theory, and all the unanswered questions about his death. What a journey.
It's been a pleasure.
And we hope you enjoyed it too. Before we sign off, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. That way you won't miss any of our future deep dives into the world of knees.
Keep those knees healthy, folks, and stay curious.
We'll see you next time, Geeks.